Yeah, absolutely. Do you have like a want to pass it down? Very happy.
Hi, okay. Yeah, nice to see you. Hi. Good. Oh, yeah. We have.
Good evening. I was like, wow, it just got quiet all of a sudden. I turned Bob Marley down and then you can hear a pin drop. It kind of makes me want to whisper on this microphone. That's the power of a microphone. You don't have to scream to be heard. Good evening, Charles Porter. I'm going to be your, I guess, helping to facilitate this discussion this evening. And so, first of all, I want to thank everyone for coming out. You could have been anywhere, you chose to be here. Before we get started, we always want to honor the people who have come before us and our ancestors. And so we do a quick land acknowledgement when we acknowledge the fact that we're standing on indigenous lands, and we acknowledge the indigenous folks who are the keepers of this land and the caretakers, and their struggles for advocacy, for representation, and for equity. We also do a labor acknowledgement and acknowledge the labor of our ancestors that helped build this country, many of whom we don't know their names, and all of the atrocities that were experienced as we continue to advocate for justice and remember the stories of those who built the foundation that we walk upon. And so we'll set the tone with that. Talk a little bit about me, and then I have the fabulous job of introducing our great new council member. So I don't know how I got tasked with this job, but it makes me look good. But a lot of folks, I see a lot of familiar faces, so one thing I want to say is just always celebrating Skid Row as a community, Skid Row as a neighborhood. This is a community center. I worked in Skid Row since 1999, and I work for United Coalition East, which is a program of social model recovery systems. And so for many years, we see the importance of seeing Skid Row as a community, advocating that Skid Row be treated and respected as such. And then when we talk about land use, so tonight we're going to be talking about the community plan, DTLA 2040. We're talking about land use, what it looks like for Skid Row. But I just want to celebrate just the spirit of advocacy. I'm part of the Skid Row now in 2040. So when they started talking about this new community plan, DTLA 2040, folks in the community were concerned. It's like, okay, you're planning for 2040, but you're ignoring the people that have been here for many years. And so really for us, it's always been a quest, a push for equity, for representation when it comes to land use. I work for a drug prevention program, so one of our major concerns was the redevelopment, the gentrification, but it was all centered around alcohol fuel redevelopment. Everyone wanted to sell alcohol. It's a new place to come and party. Our concern also with just all the smoke shops and land uses that don't really support neighborhood, that don't support community. And so one of the things in our work, we see connection and community connection as the opposite of addiction. And so that's what we strive to create. So been advocating alongside Skid Row Now in 2040 with so many great folks in the room. So Skid Row Now in 2040 and also Central City United, CCU, we're co-hosting this event. And we've been collaborating for years. Been working, it seems like, what, a decade working on the community plan. So was just finally adopted this year in January. And so we're just really tonight just celebrating our advocacy, our efforts, but also letting the community know that when things happen in your community, it's not by chance. It's because people have planned it, and they have planned it in advance. And so it's important for us to be at the table. It's important for us to have advocates like our new council member that are willing to partner with us, to sit down, to listen to us. So this is really a great opportunity. I want to run through, make sure I hit all my points before I introduce the council member, because I got these elaborate speaking points that I must cover. So let's see, elaborate. Central City United. So Central City United have been allies with us in the struggle. And Central City United is actually a larger coalition, not just focused on Skid Row, but it has representation from Skid Row, also Little Tokyo, and Chinatown, and as well as representatives from Public Counsel who have assisted in our advocacy and who serve as pro bono legal counsel, and also coalition members. So it strengthens numbers. When we go to public hearings and you see folks that their communities have been impacted, because some of the issues that we see here, folks in Chinatown, folks in Little Tokyo, they're also dealing with some of the same issues around land use, around housing affordability. And so we have allies in the room. So that's the other thing that is important for us to know. We're not alone in our struggle and in our advocacy. So point out a few major wins that we were able to get. We weren't able to get everything we wanted. One of the main things for us, particularly in Skid Row, is always acknowledge that Skid Row is, as a community, many times it's never on the map. Even in the advocacy, we talked about what we want for Skid Row. We look in the plan, it was like, well, where is Skid Row? And it was all these codes and land use acronyms. It's like, okay, but where is Skid Row? And so we know Skid Row traditionally is 3rd Street, 7th Street, Main, and Alameda, but it extends actually beyond that. But over the years, they've been trying to whittle it away and say Skid Row is this little tiny area. And so that's part of what we have to continue to do, is to say, we're here, we've been here, and you need to treat our community with equity and with justice and with respect. So some major wins in the community plan include incentives for more affordable housing and more deeply targeted low-income housing, a community benefits program that will provide funding for public open spaces, protecting small businesses and other community facilities, and also just kind of shaping the overall look and feel of DTLA 2040 community plan. So we participate in a lot of meetings with the planning department, and I think we raised their awareness as to some of the concerns. And so we continue to advocate to improve our parks, like the park right here, like our General Jeff is still fighting, to try to get the improvements that should have been made years ago finalized. And we work in solidarity with our allies in the room. And I think I'm getting to the point where it says, I will be our town hall moderator. And representatives, so from tonight you'll also hear from representatives leading a panel about DTLA 2040, our work and our advocacy. So I don't have to hit every point, because you're gonna hear from some folks that boots on the ground. And we'll be followed by question and answer. So there will be some time for question and answer with the council member, and some predetermined questions just from our work that we in advance and planning for tonight. And then we'll have closing marks also from our coalitions and time for networking with the council member at the end. So once again, thank you for coming through, and without any further ado, I get to introduce our new CD14 council member, Ms. Ysabel Jurado. We finally have a CD14 representative that we can be proud of.
I'm so happy to be here. Who of you were or are part of CCU? Raise your hands, tall and proud. All right, and who are you? Who of you have been part of Skid Row now? All right, and who of you were part of DTLA 2040? Who of you are here just because you love Skid Row? That's what's up. That's also why I'm here. I'm new here, but I'm here to be the representative, and I'm here to be in partnership with all of you, and I'm new and I'm here to learn. That's the most important thing, but also recognizing this is the first, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, this is the first town hall that we've held since we've been in office, and we made sure that we're doing it here in Skid Row. That's partly due to an outdated campaign commitment, but also recognition, like every other neighborhood in CD14, Skid Row is one of them. And saying that on the pulpit, saying that in front of you, and making sure that I make good on my commitment. And I'm grateful to have this conversation today. This is just the beginning of what's an ongoing dialogue. And I have the great pleasure of introducing you all to a very special person on our team. They are going to be our Skid Row field deputy. Their name is Lavender McCovey. Lavender, please stand up. I may not be able to meet with you as regularly, but Lavender will have weekly office hours that will be housed here in Skid Row in a partner organization. So even though ideally we'd have monthly meetings, you have something better, you get Lavender all the time. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to come here. I definitely will. But just want to make sure that this is the commitment that we have to be here, and not just in a symbolic way. And so I'm excited to hear from our panelists and get to know you all and answer your hard questions. And so thank you for the gracious introduction and welcoming me into your community. It does mean a lot. So thank you.
All right, I think y'all can make a little more noise than that. She said the first town hall. That's big. And she came right here to Skid Row. And so, without any further ado, I'm going to call our esteemed panelists up here. We have a Remy. Is there Remy in the building? Come on down. We have a Tom. We have a Mahdi. Come on down.
Remy up first.
All right, I think you have what, about 5 minutes each? Yeah, I'm gonna pass you the mic here.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me. As Charles said, my name is Remy de la Mesa. Let's make sure I don't want any screeching. I'm a community-based land use attorney, and I have worked on this downtown community plan since day one, which was about a decade ago, and have the honor of having worked for the last 20 years deeply rooted in communities like Skid Row, Chinatown, and Little Tokyo. Have worked with organizations based in all three of those communities. Was formerly with Public Council, no longer there, but have my own practice and still part of the Central City United Coalition that, again, Charles alluded to. So what I'm gonna do as quickly as I can so that we can keep it moving and have conversation is to just give you some of the real highlights of what got into the Downtown Community Plan, also known as DTLA 2040. There's a lot of acronyms in this world, so I'll try to spell them out when I can remember. But again, thanks to all of the coalitions in this room and all of our allies outside of this room, we were able to get some significant wins. Charles alluded to some kind of general ones around more affordable housing across downtown LA, deeper affordable housing, more public open space requirements and benefits and incentives. But I really want to highlight the few that came directly from this community and specifically around Skid Row. So in particular, and again, I appreciate Charles's kind of lifting up the need for the city, for all of us to acknowledge Skid Row is a neighborhood. It is a neighborhood of the city. And this plan finally did that by specifically calling out policy priorities specific to Skid Row. So there is an entire section in the plan that says Skid Row is a neighborhood and lifts up certain priorities, such as the need to prioritize the deepest levels of affordability of housing, the need to encourage the retention of residential hotels and not have those be converted, and enforcing tenants' rights in those residential hotels, to ensure that there is no new hostile architecture, which basically is how are we designing spaces, especially public open spaces, and are they open and accessible for everybody, whether you're housed or unhoused, or are they designed in a way that's trying to keep certain people, quote unquote, out of spaces, right? Public space is supposed to be public and open to everyone, and so we were making sure that what is in there in terms of design is making sure that that is implemented as new development happens in Skid Row. The issue of traffic-related fatalities is another one that came up in terms of how we can improve the infrastructure around bikes and pedestrians in the neighborhood. Again, that's just a quick sample, but there is a lot more in there specific to Skid Row. And as was said, just the real acknowledgement that this is a neighborhood that needs to be prioritized. I'll just hit on a couple others. The other one, which I think was maybe one of the harder ones, and there was a lot of negotiation, but there is a new zone or district in the plan. And this again came from all of the folks in Skid Row advocating hard for ensuring that if there's new housing going to be built in Skid Row, then it needs to be affordable housing. We need to prevent further gentrification in this area and displacement of the residents who are here, and that is the #1 priority, that there are people who live here and deserve to live here. And so originally, unfortunately, the past council person was not as amenable to some of the ideas that the community had.
That's plural.
Council members, yes, absolutely. CD14 has a long list that preceded Ysabel. Is really, we wanted to have it be an 100% affordable housing, so that any new housing had to be 100% only affordable, no market rate. That was originally part of the staff proposal from city planning as well. However, that did get whittled down to now 80%. So effectively, it shouldn't make a huge difference, even though it sounds like we lost 20%, but really, you're not gonna see any new developers who are gonna do a project that has 80% affordable units and only 20% market rate. No private developer is gonna do that deal. So effectively, having that 80% affordable requirement means that really only affordable housing should be getting built. It is a little bit of a technicality. I don't want to get all wonky on you. It's not the most exciting stuff, but it's still the most you'll see anywhere else in the city. Nowhere else in the city has that level of required affordability of new affordable housing. The other piece that I just quickly want to pull out is that we were fighting for a bigger footprint for Skid Row and where that zone would be. And again, unfortunately, that did get whittled down. I'll just quickly name its 5th, 6th, and 7th Streets, San Pedro and Central Avenue corridors instead of kind of the fuller footprint. So the fight continues when it comes to establishing the boundaries and what the neighborhood is. I think I'm getting rolled off here, so I'm gonna pause there and hopefully we can answer more of your questions in the Q&A.
Introduce yourself, Mr. Tom Grode.
I'm Tom Grode. I've been part of Skid Row now in 2040 when it first started in 2017. And I need this microphone because I have some papers here. So, shout out, there's been little flyers. Charles, I know you're one of the many folks who are doing the Black History Month celebration in San Julian. So, I know there's flyers floating around, so please get one. And then there's another flyer that's actually on the table. DTLA RA Downtown Los Angeles Residents Association is doing a resident survey online. But they're also hosting on February 20th, it says December 20th, we did your flyer, February 20th, in celebration of Black History Month, they're supporting Black businesses, and they're doing one that I haven't been to, Lost Rooftop Bar, 718 South Hill. So they're doing a gathering on February 20th at Lost Rooftop Bar. So, I want to explain where this came from. Containment and Community, the History of Skid Row and its role in the Downtown Community Plan came out the end of October 2022. You have a copy of it. You got a copy of it a year and a half ago. So shout out to Kathy Gudis, who is a college professor, University of California, Riverside. She worked with our coalition to put this together. It's 28 pages long. So I want to give a history of modern Skid Row and trying to take a lot and put it in a nutshell. If you want to watch a good movie about all of this stuff, watch Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So, it's green. In fact, it's called the green paper. Why is it called the green paper? So, in one sense, this question, answering it, takes us back to the George Floyd protests. And during those protests, city planning sent out an email saying of their 400 staff, around 25% of them specifically work for the Department of City Planning to deal with equity issues, specifically the really dark history of urban planning in America. So downtown very much experienced that history. Part of it is called urban renewal / eminent domain, and it took place in Bunker Hill in the 1950s and 60s. So I mentioned Roger Rabbit because it's all about the suburbs. And with the suburbs, you had to build the freeways and the highways. And so what urban planning across the country did is it would use eminent domain to seize land. So it would go to the property owner and say, this is what we believe the market value of your property is. We're taking it. Here's the money. And what they would do is they would take the land and then build things like freeways on it in order to connect the suburbs to downtown areas and where the jobs were. What happened is that poor neighborhoods and people of color neighborhoods were the ones with the eminent domain being demolished to build the freeways and the highways. So the version of this that happened downtown is urban planning type people came in, used eminent domain to wipe out all the affordable housing in Bunker Hill in order to build the massive skyscrapers that you see. Okay, and in fact, that kind of increased the population of Skid Row because people were being displaced. It was kind of aging Victorian mansions, so it tended to be poor people in Bunker Hill at that point, as everybody with money was now moving out to these suburbs. So actually the population of Skid Row increased because of all the affordable housing wiped out in Bunker Hill through eminent domain. The question then became, is Skid Row going to be part 2 of Bunker Hill? So City Hall commissioned a panel, mainly business representatives, to go through this strategic planning process. They came up with a plan that had the color silver as the cover of the book. So it got the nickname the Silver Book because that was the color of the cover of it. And that basically said, yes, Skid Row is going to be Bunker Hill Part 2, which specifically means the single room occupancy hotels that existed were going to be wiped out. So there was a growing backlash across the country to this urban renewal / eminent domain. And so people, LA Catholic Worker, a huge part of this, basically said, no, we need a community-based plan. And the essence of the community-based plan is no, we aren't going to wipe out the single room occupancy hotels. The government is going to buy them from slumlords, and then we're going to renovate them and have them become government subsidized low-income housing. So that plan had a blue cover. So that became nicknamed the Blue Book. So you had the Silver Book and you had the Blue Book, and City Hall had to make a decision. They made the decision to go with the Blue Book, okay? And out of that, SRO Housing was created as a nonprofit to go through this process of acquiring the SRO buildings to renovate them as government subsidized low housing. A nun? A nun, what's her name? Alice Callahan, like, well, you're not doing all the work that needs to be done, so she created Skid Row Housing Trust to do this exact same thing in partnership with SRO Housing. So because of that decision, that's why we have these SRO housing facilities for decades and decades, because if they went with the Silver Book, it would have all been torn down, and Skid Row, as we understand it, would no longer exist. Now, that eventually became known as the policy of containment, or the containment zone, where it wasn't just we're going to purchase all these hotel buildings from the slumlords, renovate them as government subsidized housing, we are also going to contain all the social services downtown in Skid Row, so anybody who needs these social services will be in Skid Row, and theoretically that will open up the rest of downtown Los Angeles for market rate housing development. So this all took place in the 1970s. So revisiting all of this stuff, containment, policy of containment, containment zone, and community, the community that has grown up over the fact that there are people living here over the decades, the history of Skid Row and its role in the downtown community plan. Doing a community plan surfaced all this stuff. It all of a sudden became really important because we're going through a community planning process. So we had the Silver Book, and then we had the Blue Book, and now 40 years later we got the Green Paper. So that's why it's called the Green Paper. And what do my notes say next? So
How about 1 more minute?
1 more minute. Okay, my paper says 1 more minute. So, you mentioned this, and there were papers that they've all been taken, but it's on the website. There are 20 specific land use recommendations for Skid Row in the existing plan that officially happened this month, or January. 20. All the other neighborhoods, historic core, arts, everybody got anywhere from 3 to 5. The one that got 6 was the convention center area, which isn't even a neighborhood, it's the convention center. So it went from 6 to 20. There are 20 specific land use recommendations specifically for Skid Row as a neighborhood. If you have wanted to sink your teeth into something historic, you got something historic to sink your teeth into.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Mahdi. Manji. I'm the Director of Public Policy for Inner City Law Center. We're a nonprofit law firm based in Skid Row, a couple blocks from here on 7th Central. We serve folks who are homeless, and there's some homelessness throughout LA County. I'm now realizing that, I arguably should have said a couple things first and then reversed the process. So I'm going to take us slightly back to talk about. I was asked to talk about the value of a community plan broadly. So I think when we're thinking about community planning and planning broadly, I think it's best to think about this as a process of democracy in action, right? That's why we have these processes. We're working on developing a process for the community to provide their input on zoning, on land use, on project approvals, both at the larger scale level, so at the general plan level, which every city is required to have a general plan to determine where various uses should be. And then when we're talking about the city of LA, the city of Los Angeles is divided into 35 community plans. And downtown LA is just one of the 35. And they're required to update various elements. There's around 13 elements. Housing is one of them, safety is one of them. There's a sound element and a aesthetics element. There's various elements within the broader community plan. And each of those are updated at different timelines. DTLA 2040 is the update for the downtown community plan. And it's all about the land use and zoning for greater downtown LA. In terms of DTLA, in terms of the DTLA 2040 and the community plan around that, it has sort of, the housing element is one of the key aspects, and the housing element is updated every 8 years as required by state law. And so with that, the city of Los Angeles has decided to use the downtown LA community plan as one of the core ways to meet its broader housing goals. In the last housing element process, the state found that the city needed to build around 450,000 homes across the city. Then using sort of an algorithm to decide how much land, how much they could build on existing zoning, they found that based on the existing zoning, they could build around 250,000 homes, and they needed to rezone for around 200,000 more homes. And so part of that process was looking at affordable housing overlay zones, looking at density bonuses across the city, and one of them was looking at downtown specifically. Under the current process in terms of downtown LA, we've had various community input processes over the last 10 years. I'm a relative newbie up here. I've only been involved in the downtown LA community plan for around 5 years, so that's around half of the whole entire downtown LA community plan process. You can imagine that over these 10 years, there's been various meetings, some of them in Skid Row, but not all of them. And I think one of the problems we have with these meetings is only the people who are able to come to those meetings are often able to speak at them, to provide their input. I think that's generally a problem when we're talking about community input and how we do it, right? We're only talking about who can show up, who can come to the meeting, who can speak. Oftentimes, only landowners are notified that these meetings are happening. So that's another big problem. If we're only notifying landowners, we're not notifying renters. That's going to be who provides the input. So, in terms of this community input, I think I want to say a lot of sort of thanks to the Skid Row Now Coalition and to CCU for providing the input for organizing meetings like these and for bringing folks in. But I would hope that over the coming years, We think about planning not as a point in time or sort of a community update that happens once every 20 or 30 years, but an ongoing process that takes place every single day. We're all here in this community, and everyday projects are proposed, and unfortunately, the only people who know that the hearing is going to happen are able to show up and provide input, right? The opportunity with the plan is to provide input before an individual project is proposed. And so I think part of what community planning can be going into the future, especially as it relates to Skid Row, is doing a broader outreach, maybe door to door, maybe tent to tent, maybe talking to everybody, doing polling, seeing what the community needs. And last but not least, making sure that when there are these community meetings, when folks do come into these rooms, that they represent the community. I think that's often a very, very important piece. Because whenever we have these community meetings, whenever we have these opportunities for people to call in, you'll notice a lot of these people will call in and they'll say, "Hi, my name is, and I'm a homeowner in this neighborhood. Hi, my name is, and I live right here," right? But guess what, when we're talking about the city of LA, only 35% of us are homeowners. 65% of folks are renters. If you've ever gone down to City Hall, if you're here on the phone, you'll notice that almost everybody calling in is either a homeowner or a landlord. And they often have different interests than the folks here. So I think part of what needs to happen going into the future is that we seek to make representative panels, maybe through polling, maybe through randomized door knocking, randomized and other such randomized efforts to make sure we have input from everybody. And I think that's my time. Thank you.
And I want to thank the panelists for sharing their wisdom. One of the things that, and I talked a little earlier in my intro, we got involved in land use very early on, but to that point, talking to community members. And so one of our first projects, we just had meetings with some of the SRO tenants, and we asked them what are some of the major issues you see in your neighborhood. And they generated a list of problems. It was bars, liquor stores, and a few hotels that were wild. And they were like, these places, we want them to be improved. And so for us, it was like looking at land use. That was a land use conversation. So we learned a lot from Community Coalition, just about nuisance abatement. But in that process, we started to see the importance of community voice, because when we would go and advocate and say that these property owners should be held accountable for what they're doing in the community, the response was, but it's Skid Row. Skid Row is not a community. And that was back then, but that's still kind of the sentiment. And so we have to continue to be present and to be represented, because we would show up at public hearings for alcohol license, and they would say, they want to sell alcohol at the store and everybody else is selling alcohol, and then the state might allow only like 10 uses and it's already 100. And then they'll tell us, well, it can't be over-concentrated if it's already over-concentrated, so we'll just add another one. And so when this advocacy started, that was one of the things we were like, let's jump ahead of the curve. Instead of going after each individual public hearing, which is hard to do, let's put it in a plan. What makes a healthy community? What makes a strong community? And so we're really excited that some of the things we advocated for are actually in the plan. But then the next piece is the implementation, and then the accountability piece. Because who's watching? Who's making sure that it's being implemented, and who's holding folks accountable for following those regulations? And so we all, now that we know, we all need to continue to be involved in this process. So, thank you. I think, are we out there with our questions?
Do you want to do just one, if anybody wants a quick comment?
If y'all want to, we'll go back to
Yeah,
anything you didn't say that you need to say.
So I just want to piggyback on something you said, because it's so important. So the city, and then Skid Row, this coalition started in 2017. The city began the process of updating the downtown community plan a couple years before that through an effort called Recode LA. If you're a zoning person, you know exactly what I'm saying. There might be 4 zoning people in here. So you don't need to know that. Recode LA turned into DTLA 2040. And so went through this entire planning process. If you've been involved, let's say Skid Row Action Plan or anything else, you know planning processes can be fun. It's like, here's 10 recommendations, here's your green dot, is that your and here's your red dot for your second choice, and it's like, and it's meeting after meeting, and it's like you whittle your 10 recommendations down to 4, down to 3, and it can be a really cool community-based process. But the next stage is called implementation. And if you're not sinking your teeth into it, if you're not advocating, if you're not putting pressure on City Hall, then there's a good chance some of these really cool experiences you have are just going to end up in history. And they weren't designed to end up in history, they were designed to be implemented. In other words, they actually come to life in a practical sense, and they become part of your community rather than part of some really cool looking plan that's now gathering dust.
I'll just say we have a very special opportunity here with the council member that cares about this community. And what I'll say to everybody here is, we've worked quite a bit on this plan, but at the end of the day, implementation comes down to everybody here, to everybody out there. So make sure whenever something goes on, whenever you see something and you'd like to, or you'd like to see something, make sure you talk to Lavender today, make sure you talk to Steve today, make sure you talk to the council member today, get their phone number, get their emails, make sure you give them a call and let them know. Because at the end of the day, that's how implementation happens. That's all I'm gonna add.
Yeah, just to close and maybe close this loop too around process, both on implementation and on getting to this point with the plan, to Mahdi's earlier comments around what would a different process look like. I just want to give a huge shout out to the Skid Row Now and 2040 coalitions, to CCU, because they created that process and implemented that process with no help from anyone in government, with no help from the outside, but knowing that centering the people's voices is the way we need to be doing things and showing the city what equitable planning looks like. And I think there was, to Tom's point, already the community had its own plan for Skid Row, had its own vision before DTLA 2040 came up. I know the same thing happened in Little Tokyo. They had their own community-driven plan years ago saying this is what we need. And by building that infrastructure and keeping everyone involved so that it's not just a one-off process, but it's going to be continuing in perpetuity as long as you care about your neighborhoods, then this plan will continue to come to life. And the next plan hopefully will be even better than this one. So again, just want to thank the organizations and all the individuals who have already built that out and continue to create that process even when the systems around us don't support it.
All right, so we have a few folks, I see one at the mic right now, that are gonna ask a few questions for the council member. And what I'll do, I'll call folks. So we had already just kind of selected some community leaders that were gonna address some questions of things that we wanted to ask the council member and say, oh, this is a great opportunity. And so if your question doesn't get asked, there is gonna be time just kind of for networking, mixing and mingling, where you can, ask the question in person. But we just wanted to get a few on the mic that are really pertinent to the community plan and some of the work that people have been advocating for. So Matt, come on down. You can introduce yourself.
Thanks, Charles. My name is Matt Harper. I help run the Los Angeles Catholic Worker, which runs the Hippie Kitchen down on 6th and Gladys. We've been down on Skid Row for 54 years, not me, but my community. And I think we've heard a lot tonight about all the reasons why and how the important voices of the Skid Row community have often been silenced and ignored. Therefore, it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone why Skid Row neighbors have long advocated and struggled for the establishment of a Skid Row Neighborhood Council to ensure self-representation and accountability in local decision-making. And as was kind of talked about tonight, the implementation of the DTLA 2040 community plan offers the next opportunity to ensure that the voices of this community are heard, which is why Skid Row Now in 2040 has reiterated the need for City Hall to formally recognize and support a Skid Row Council to oversee the implementation of this plan. So as the person tasked with ensuring the voices of this community of Skid Row are at the table, how will CD14 support Skid Row's efforts for self-governance within its traditional boundaries, 3rd to 7th Main to Alameda, and ensure that policies and guidelines in our community plan genuinely support Skid Row residents by prioritizing their well-being and keeping them safe from further harm and displacement?
Thank you so much, Matt. I mean, I also want to reflect a little bit back on some of the things that the panelists said, in that Skid Row, in the absence of law and government and elected officials supporting it, is a community that stands on its own 2 feet, 10 toes down, always have, always will. And also, Little Tokyo and Skid Row being a community that created its own community plan, and in doing so, sought entry into just the formal system, which we call government, right? And that being the form of self-governance itself, the fact that you got 20 land use changes in the plan itself, but as some of these folks, my colleagues mentioned, implementation is always the hard part. And holding me accountable is one of the things that we're gonna have to do, and the law is only as good as it is actually enforced. And the commitment and the resources putting it towards that. And I always say the relationship of the government is a relationship between the person doing the governing and the governed. And so it's this constant communication that we're gonna keep going. And so with that as the foundation for my philosophy for governing of this like mutual relationship, making sure we hired local, having a dedicated field deputy to Skid Row, as I mentioned, doing office hours. I'm going to be doing it throughout the district, making sure that I have office hours in this community as well. We've been supportive of the Skid Row's Resident Council that is part of the Skid Row Action Plan, and trying to make that actionable at the city level and how we can match the efforts of the county. In part, having the Brain Trust, which is Steve Diaz on our team to help shepherd that through. Yeah, give a big shout out to Steve. Yeah. He's holding it down there. We should start hiring some people so maybe he can rest. Not was mad at him. And then also, you know, to your point about the neighborhood council, I've always been supportive of it. I will continue to be supportive of it as the chair of Arts, Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhoods Enrichment. Trying to figure out how we do get that done at the city is important, and also making sure that Skid Row's, not only the neighborhood council, but the parks that are here are being paid attention to as real parks as well. So those are things that are in the, you know, queue that we're trying to work through, and I'm committed to.
Hi Ysabel, thank you so much for being here. Good to see you again. So yeah, I'm the project coordinator with United Coalition East Prevention Project, so working closely with Charles Porter. And yeah, my question here I wrote down. So our DTLA 2040 Land Use Recommendation 3014 encourages new healthy food retail, including grocery stores in Skid Row, and incentivizes Skid Row businesses to accept EBT and other forms of government assistance for fresh produce. So we want to know, how will your office deal with unhealthy businesses like liquor stores, smoke shops, contributing this area to be like a food desert in a way, and increase health and wellness in our Skid Row Road neighborhood, specifically through increasing healthy food access for Skid Row residents?
Yeah, thank you so much. What was your name again?
Anna Nicole.
Anna, okay. Pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much. I guess I'm going to speak in some zoning terms, which sometimes I don't like. But my office will explore the takedown ratio for master conditional use permits, or I don't even want to do the acronym. That just means that when a new development with a conditional use comes in, we can explore having them buy out old liquor stores and licenses to reduce the number of licenses that are actually in the area. and ensure that applications for the sale of alcohol are thoroughly vetted during the public hearing process. That's a second thing. And initiating revocation proceedings whenever there's problems that have been identified. Revocation is when, we basically revoke their liquor license. And at the same time, I'm interested in attracting new development that community members want and Skid Row residents want, and making sure that it's no longer a food desert, and making sure that affordable grocery stores and markets. I feel like being council member is like you're the cheerleader for your district, and land use is your main bailiwick or ballywick. I don't know what that term is actually. Is it farming? I'm from here, so I don't know. It's, as I say in my people, land use is my bag, and so is in my bag, and so attracting development that is community centered, what they want, and supporting like Pastor Q's efforts to make Skid Row's People's Market a real comprehensive grocery store in Skid Row. And so thinking about how we can find that opportunity for funding and other ways we can have that in the neighborhood.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Back on question 2.
Good evening and revolutionary greetings to all. Thank you, Ysabel, for putting it on. Thank you, Councilmember, for being here. My name is General Dogon. I'm a shut-it-down organizer on Skid Row with LA Can. Here we are in the 60th anniversary of the Civil Rights Movement, and my question is around 4118, right, which is a Jim Crow law that was created during the Jim Crow segregation to give LAPD more power to use as a social control to communities of color to keep everybody separate, to keep the races separated, right? It's been found unconstitutional in the Jones versus the city case, right, violating 8th Amendment, right? It has been the linchpin for criminalization all across the 9th Circuit, right, all the way leading up to the Grants Pass decision we just had, right? You could be traced all that back to 4118 right here on Skid Row, right? And so my question, is, here we go. Our downtown 2040 recommendation 3011 calls for enhancing public space for the use and benefit of everyone. LAMC 4118, on the other hand, targets and criminalizes us for existing in public space. Do you oppose the expansion of 4118 and commit to reversing existing 4118 zones to meet the standards outlined in our community plan?
Thank you, General Dogon. I first want to start it off by criminalizing homeless people doesn't put them into homes, right? And living on the streets is not a crime, and I don't think further criminalizing folks that are in that situation is going to get us anywhere, and that doesn't comport with my heart, my philosophy, and the kind of governance I want. And thinking about when we're talking, and from what this enhancing public spaces mean, from what I've read, from what I've talked to you about, it's about having a third space where people feel safe, where the community can build, where you're being excluded from private spaces and some public spaces, and this third space needs to be where you can be home. And making sure, but at the same time, making sure that it's clean. So we want to make sure our streets are healthy. We want to make sure that our streets are hospitable as people recover and create their own communities out there. We're not going to be relying on 4118 as a mechanism to accomplish, resolving homelessness. Because it ain't the solution. The facts are there. We're looking at the reports, and the city the rest of the city's figuring it out. But we will not be establishing, and we will not be establishing any more 4118 zones in this district. And instead we're committing to holistic outreach to our unhoused community members and making sure that we can triage them and get them to housing when housing is available, and thinking about ways we can keep people indoors when we can, but dealing with making sure the streets are clean so that people are not getting sick out there, and making sure that that people can stay healthy. And then, you know, again, as chair of the Arts Parks Committee, making sure that we have accessible, clean public spaces that work for all Angelinos, and going back to advocating for the parks that do exist and the infrastructure improvements that are needed here in Skid Row, which include trash cans, sidewalk repair, lights, all the things that other neighborhoods call and ask for and get it. But because Skid Row has been deemed to not be a neighborhood, doesn't receive as well. So that's the other ways that I'm like, that's how you really reclaim public space. That's how you make it feel safer, and that's what we can do in the city.
Well, because we're looking for a whole new day on Skid Row. You know, it went from Skid Row to No Love Row with the criminalization, starting with Jan Perry to Sleazy Weezy, you know what I'm saying, to KDL, right? So now it's going to be a new day with you, so we look forward to that, right?
I'm tracked
right,
with.
well, power to the people.
Thanks, General.
I'm Coach Ron here. I've been a resident here in Skid Row for over 20 years. I'm overseeing currently the 303 Street Basketball League that's in Gladys, General Jeff Park. And I'm just a staunch advocate of park activation through funding and collaboration. So I'd like to ask this question.
Yes.
After years of community advocacy, the Department of Recreation and Parks has still not completed the renaming of Gladys Park to General Jeff Park.
What's up with
The
that?
ball is down in your court. What concrete steps will CD14 take to finally complete this process as an essential part of the bigger picture of proposed upgrades for San Julian Park and increasing public green space as well as workforce development through the parks?
Thanks, Coach Ron.
You're welcome.
Went in for the pass. I'm going for the alley-oop. That's all I got. But I don't know. I lost all my sports metaphors. But I had my planning director, Kevin, look into this before, so we've reached out to Recreation and Parks and we're following up on it. And the reason why I keep bringing up the parks is because there's a Parks Needs Assessment survey that the Recreation and Parks is putting up in the weeks to come. And part of it is they want to figure out how we can upgrade the parks experience and maintain, upgrade, but also very targetedly, they said they want to focus on underserved communities and engaging them. And one of the things that I asked the department and the consultants was, well, how do you propose to do that? And also in talking with Steve, recognizing that the parks here don't seem to be recognized as parks, and unhoused people are, I don't know if they would categorize them as part of the underserved community they want to continue to invite to the parks. And so once that survey comes out, I'm going to make sure to contact you all and invite you, if you're groups, because they're identifying community groups to interview as part of interest groups for this. So some obvious ones are like seniors, parents. But I really think Skid Row should be part of this formation process because you have unique needs and represent such a I think Skid Row is like one of the multi-generational, multi-ethnic, multi-racial communities here in the city. Like it's so diverse that can capture a lot of, I think, the demands that end up being universal in many aspects, right? But making sure that your voice is there. The second thing, so we're working on the process, want to invite you on the survey. And the third thing is, I'm asking the Rec and Parks to provide a comprehensive update on the upgrades to San Julian Park. And so we'll try to figure out what there's a lot of report backs happening. And then there's like, so I asked for the report, and then it goes around, and then it comes back, and then I get a report back. So, when I get that, Coach Ron, we got you. But it just may be the whole season. But we're working on it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, council member. My name is Grant Sanu. I work at the Little Tokyo Service Center, and we're one of the leaders in the Central City United Coalition. Steve told me I have to talk fast. but I also have the longest question.
Hey.
That's fine.
So the IX1 zone, which was originally introduced as the affordable housing only zone, was included in the DTLA 2040 community plan in 2018. However, last minute changes by our former council member, made without transparency, dramatically altered its intent by allowing market rate development, weakening protections put in place by the Department of City Planning, and at the same time, directly across the street from the IX1 zone, the proposed 4th and Central mega development raises further concerns about displacement and erasure of Skid Row residents and our sense of community here. Despite being within Skid Row's traditional neighborhood boundaries, earlier media coverage referred to the site as Arts District adjacent, while the Department of City Planning's EIR described this neighborhood as on the eastern border of the Central City East District, failing to recognize Skid Row by name. Transparent and meaningful neighbor engagement are essential for 4th and Central and other pending large developments to ensure that these projects result in low-income housing for current neighbors. Now this is the question. How are you going to ensure that projects built in Skid Row, in the neighborhood of Skid Row, including 4th and Central, provide low-income housing for existing Skid Row residents and who do not have homes or healthy living conditions? Or I'm gonna put it a little bit differently, using some of your words, which I really appreciated. How will you ensure that this project and others are opportunities for community-centered development that the community wants?
Yes, thank you, Grant, for the question and for getting it out there. I think one of the things that I want to uplift is, what's been said about is the erasure of this neighborhood in name, in nomenclature, in the plan. And part of the reason why I got into community economic development work as a lawyer was because I was trying to defend historic Filipino town. I'm Filipina, contrary to, I'm not Latina, that's all I'm gonna say. I'm Filipino American, but it gets confusing. But I'm proud to die, I speak some Spanish, it's all good. And, I started to do that because I didn't want my neighborhood that Filipinos first migrated there was a community center for me to disappear. And one of the pieces of evidence that it was gentrifying was when someone went on Snapchat, when Snapchat was bigger, and they said they just moved in. And when they put in there in the neighborhood, the filter was like geotagged, and it said Silver Lake. And all of the ads for the neighborhood, for the units that were in historic Filipino town, were now being marketed as South Silver Lake. And I was like, oh hell no. You're not gonna put the history in historic Filipino town on my people like that. And so recognizing that that is such an important piece of this, right, is not allowing that erasure. And part of it is, I want to uplift that DTLA community plan is one of the, I think it is the first community plan to include mandatory affordable housing built into the zoning code. Yeah. And that is in part due to the fierce advocacy of the community that is here. And I know you'll hold us accountable, make sure that happens. And this is an opportunity and one we'll have to closely monitor to ensure developments build their fair share of affordable housing. Now, regarding 4th and Central, I'm still trying to sink my teeth into it, but we're taking a very close look at the affordable housing component of it. I mean, bottom line, the very least we can expect is that the project include affordable housing that's compliant with Measure JJJ. But I'm also interested to see how the affordable units comply with the Downtown LA 2040 plan. So we're still looking at that, even though I think there's a hearing that's fast approaching, so we're ramping up in that regard. And I ran on a platform of co-governance, and so I invite the Skid Row community. Like, this town hall is just the beginning. The implementation process is going to continue, especially as developments arise, and figuring out how we can continue to make the intentions and the policies that are written there become a reality.
end up here and it looks like we've literally stepped off of a slave mothership, because there's so many, not just displaced black folks, but literally as I look in the face sometimes as folks, it looks like we are still carrying the trauma of our ancestors and how we go about our day-to-day existence in Skid Row. And even as for myself, as a woman who is by all means considered someone who is, very intentional about living their lives, I still carry that trauma as well. So I say that because, black middle-aged elderly women, we track as a #1 demographic displaced into poverty and homelessness here in Skid Row, and dare I say, throughout our city, and and we're one of the #1 demographics throughout the country being displaced here in poverty to homelessness. And a study showed that between 2017 and 2030. 65 will be the medium age, so we also cross that intersection of aging population as well. Skid Row, from a woman's perspective, who I identified my platform as, was birthed because I wanted to know and call to the attention of the fact of our voices as black women get left out in the conversation. As you'll notice, as we've talked throughout the evening, there has not been one black woman identified in the conversation thus far. So I'm the first at the end, right? Okay. So, so I'm just pointing that out. I wanted to share also along with that, we get part of I personally have been part of many, many research projects here in Skid Row, including this green paper one. But you won't see my name identified in any of the research projects except for as a study, as a case study. So when we talk about equity, inequality, and inclusion, that's also been part of the patriarchy and the gentrification that also happens. It's very important that, as someone now who is in school, that the research that I put into the 12 plus years that I've been in this community are also included in the research that goes out into the world. That helps me. So that's also part of how you include and build equity for me. So again, I started the conversation of Skid Row from a woman's perspective, again, because I wanted to raise the voice of ensuring that women were included in the room and space. I wrote a poem for a women's empowerment group that I started 2014, 2015, that I held on a weekly basis off of my EBT card when I was living off of $221 a month for 5 years. And it was so very important for me to create a space where women could come to and feel like Cinderella minus the evil stepmothers and stepsisters that oftentimes are running these programs. This is how it reads. I am not a liberated woman, as I'm just a woman who yearns to live free. I wish to live free from the bondage of inequality. I'm just longing for equality that is it's yet to be. Sure, we've come far, but how far we have yet to come, because we as women, we're still striving. We're still striving for our equal son. Whether we're sitting in the White House, Donald Trump Plaza, or up in Beverly Hills, to the lows of the Appalachians, the rundown sawmills, or the Catskills. Whether your zip code is in Manhattan, New York, or right here in Skid Row. Human dignity should not come at the price for only those who can afford concierge prices and exquisite means. I humbly tell you, my voice indeed, it is my power. In fact, it's what fuels me each day. It gives me the strength which surpasses none. It allows me to be more of my equal son. Please know, I'm just one voice. I've won no battles. The battles they have yet to be won. This voice is just another gift God gave to me, so I can stand tall for dignity and equality. Thank you for coming to Skid Row this evening. Thank you all for being here.
Steve.
Okay, everyone.
Sorry, I just wanted to get on the mic real quick and clarify something real quick. Unfortunately, the council member will not be here to mingle. Lav will be here, I'll be here. And then if there's any concerns or sort of issues with that, just talk to Charles, because it's all Charles's fault for reading the script wrong.
I said it, I did say it.
But go for it.
Thank you, thanks for clarifying that. And like was mentioned, the goal is to have more town halls. So we're gonna bring the council member back again and again and again. And so I just, in closing, I just want to thank folks for showing up tonight and just stress all the points that were mentioned today is that through advocacy, we can continue to make sure our neighborhoods and communities are represented, that people are treated with equity and with dignity. And there's a lot of leaders in the room right now, and I'm glad folks showed up because these are new connections that you may not have had before. And the council member being here tonight is just a commitment that process has started. So I would say take advantage of meeting the staffers, get their information, exchange information, follow up with them. And Tom had mentioned we're doing an event. I just also want to shout out folks that have been putting in work for a long time. So a lot of community folks that are really changing and standing up. Pastor Q was in the building. We also, Henriette, I got to say, the Skid Row History Museum and Los Angeles Poverty Department have been putting in work for a very long time. But they recently had the 15th annual festival for all Skid Row artists. So we got festivals, and our Black History Month celebration is the 25th annual Black History Month celebration. So that just go to show you there's been stuff happening in this community a long time. I see Restoration of Hope is in the building. We got folks, and shout out also, we got Mark from Rec and Park. So I'm glad you showed up because the council members gonna work with you to try to get this, get these parks up and running the way they should be. And so for everyone that showed up tonight, I just wanna say, and everybody's been putting in work, Urban Voices, Hike, I'm not gonna catch everybody, but you in the building. Also Midnight Mission, the great musical performances and connections with the neighborhood. If you're missing out, you're missing out. And so I love everybody that's here, and let's continue to work together and stand up, speak up, and hold the system accountable, because that's ultimately what we're talking about. So, thank you. Network, get that card,